These are two pieces I picked out from the collection at the Hood Museum that I wanted to talk about. And the first one I'll talk about is this drum. And the drum, just like these dance fans, are something that are still used today in Alaska. And the drum is used by all the different Alaska Native culture groups in Alaska. This one is specifically Inupiaq. One thing that's really special about this is the material that it's made with, the drum skin. And the way I've learned about Inupiaq drums and about dance fans are by reading things in books, but also by working with Alaska Native elders and culture bearers who have told me things and chosen to share things with me about these different types of pieces. And when it comes to items that may have been used in the past in ceremonies and in private community ceremonies, people choose to share certain kinds of information about that from their community. And that's the sort of information I feel comfortable sharing because they chose to make that information public. So that's what I'll be talking to you, where I'll be talking from today about these two pieces. So, so in addition to what I learned during research for an exhibition that I worked on for 10 years, some of the public programs that we've had there since then have involved bringing in Alaska Native artists, scholars, language speakers to look at museum pieces in the collection and then to use those as not only an opportunity to document their language but to also talk about their cultural heritage. And one of the pieces we looked at from the Inupiaq region is a drum. And the people I'll be speaking about, if you want to hear what they said themselves, you can go to the Arctic Studies Center microsite called Sharing Knowledge Alaska. And there's videos from St. Lawrence Island and also from the Inupiaq region about drums, and you can hear them speak. So for this one, I think this is from Kotzebue, and in a language workshop that we did, Willie Goodwin and Herbert Foster Sr. were there, and they talked about drums, and also Sylvester Ayak, who is, his family's from King Island, and he was raised in Nome. And he actually has a dance group called the King Island Dancers, which is an amazing group to be able to see perform. And when he talked about the drum, one thing that he mentioned is that that the drum, it's not really quite a legend or a myth. The tradition of the oral tradition as opposed to the written tradition is something that's very strong in Alaska and Alaska Native culture. And so in oral tradition, I'll say, there's a story that about a giant eagle, and that I won't go into, but to bring it back to where the drum is, that the giant eagle brought drums to mankind and womankind because one person had an interaction with a giant eagle, and the eagle taught him how to make a drum, and it replicates the heartbeat of an eagle, because the story is about a mother eagle losing baby eagles, and you can read about that story if you want to look that up. So anyway, when he went back to his village, he made the first drum. And so drums have been a part of ceremonies and are also parts of celebration in the present and the future. And so this drum, part of what makes it special, even though it's very plain and it has a little damage, but that's okay, it's been used, you know, so it would show some wear and tear, is that the drum skin is made out of a humpback whale liver membrane. And different types of gut, which are inner membranes of animals, are used for different things in Alaska because it's a really great material. And when we spoke about another object, we talked about how an Alaska Native value is not to waste things. So they try to use different parts of the animals that they harvest for food. And so you'll find in the Hood collection there are boots that have gut skin, there are parkas, rain parkas, and we talked about the parkas worn when kayak, and when we looked at the Sukbiak kayak. So there are different things made out of these kinds of materials, but what makes this really special is that it's this liver membrane. And when I was talking to Sylvester one time, he said, he goes, yeah, that liver membrane, that's the best. That has the best sound of all the different things you can use. And I'm like, wow, they went through and tested every possible inner marine mammal membrane to find out which has the best sound. I was very much impressed. So they have very high standards for their musical instruments. And today, a lot of drums that you see, especially ones that are performed with, might be made out of different materials, like commercially made materials like nylon, but everyone knows that the best sound comes from one that's made out of gut. And Sylvester told me that some people are starting to go back to using gut. And it's harder to come by because you have to process that material and it's very labor intensive. And you have to take really good care of it because it's sensitive to humidity differences and temperature differences, which is part of why this one's split here. And when drummers use them, they need to spray them with the water before they actually drum with them. In Alaska, unlike other areas of the United States, which we refer to as the lower 48, once you hit a certain area, and you can look this up at a map online, you get to what's called the tree line, and that varies across North America where that actually is. And in the area where this was collected in Kotzebue, there aren't trees. And so, and that was true for a lot of territories for Alaska Native groups. And they would collect driftwood because a lot of settlements are either on a river or on the ocean, an inlet, a bay, that sort of thing. And they would collect driftwood to make various things. And in addition to a drum frame, you can see things in the collections here at the Hood Museum, like bowls. And when you look at some of the hunting implements, like a wooden harpoon shaft or a dart shaft, those are also made out of wood and driftwood. When I was working on the video from this group of Inupiaq people that got together and they talked about the drum, there was this one word and I was like, that's a strange looking word for what the English is, and I wasn't sure if the translation I got was just sort of more general, and I just was curious. So I emailed the person I was working with, Bernadette Ivana Stimfel from the Queric Incorporated, and they also have a cultural organization there too, and that's a Native corporation. She goes, well, wait, I'm going to go on my lunch hour. Let me go find Sylvester and ask him. So she found Sylvester and she talked to him about that word because it looked too different from the word for wood that I knew. And so I thought maybe there was more in it. And he said, yeah, there is. And he said, I'm so glad you brought that word up because we don't make drum frames out of driftwood anymore. So I haven't thought about this in a really long time. And he's like, well, but now that I think about it, I realize that word's really important because it's for a special kind of driftwood that's in a special shape that you find on the beach. That's the only kind you use for making a drum frame. Because they don't have trees in Nome, and so they have to get all their wood from driftwood, at least they did in the past. And he was so happy that he remembered that word. And then he and Bernie went on to talk about other special words for things that are no longer used in present day that if they don't document might get lost, and that specialized knowledge, that all that experimental and tried and tested information might be lost. So they're hoping to work on a project where they get more of a chance to do that. I don't speak Inupiaq. I know a handful of words. Like I know this is called a kilaun, and that's in Inupiaq. And there's different dialects of Inupiaq. So someone from Barrow compared to someone from King Island or Kotzebue or Point Hope might have the same word or slightly different words for the same sort of thing. And but kilaun is what its name is for people that speak the language, the dialect in Kotzebue. And I can provide you what that word is for the driftwood later because I can't remember it, but I have it somewhere in my documents. So in front of the drum, you see a drumstick, and all of the drums that are hand drums like this that have a handle for Alaska Native cultures, and that's the kind of drums they have, they're all played with a drumstick. And this is just a narrow piece of wood, and in this case, it looked like at some point it broke, but they just taped it up and were able to keep using it. Yeah, and sometimes it looks like they maybe put something on the end too to soften the blow a little bit of the drumstick against the drum skin. What I highly recommend, there's a film called The Drums of Winter, and Leonard Camerly, who's a documentary filmmaker, he's based at the museum at the University of Fairbanks. He worked with Sarah Elder to do some documentary films around Alaska that are fantastic. They were filmed in, I think, the late 70s, early 80s, and this one in particular, Drums of Winter, was filmed in Amonuk, which is a Yupik village, and it's fantastic footage of drumming in a men's / it's also called a community house. It's called a kaskig. And so I really recommend you watching that film or a clip of that film because you can actually see them drumming and singing. a drum from what I've seen, a drum is held in front, and then you hit the drum either from the front or the back. And so the front side of the frame or the back side of the frame, and that varies between some of the cultures. But the film also has been recently restored, and now it's in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., so it's very much worth watching, and you can find clips of it online. I had mentioned that drums are used throughout Alaska, as well as in southeast Alaska, and amongst the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. I haven't been looking at those pieces this week at the museum, but they usually have, you know, beautiful decorations on the drum skins, very complicated ones that relate to the totemic animals that are affiliated with their culture group, and that's something that you can find examples of online to take a look at. And if you go to the Sharing Knowledge website, which is part of an exhibit I worked on, and search for drum, you'll see different drums from different groups. And drums in other regions did have designs on them. When you see them in the area where this came from, you don't see decorations on them very much. And part of that too is that may have been the case in the past, but now they're used for, you know, public celebrations and that sort of thing, and they're less likely to have decorations because of that. Another thing that Sylvester Ayak told me about this is that that drums need to be treated with respect, that drums have a spirit, and that they weren't a plaything, and that you have to treat them with respect. And that was something that he really wanted to emphasize, that for him, for his culture, it just wasn't simply a musical instrument that you played for music. It had much more depth of meaning than that. And he found that very important to share, so I wanted to share that too. Another thing I'd like to talk about that also relates to ceremonies and celebrations that are still used today are these dance fans. And I'm going to go ahead and put these gloves on because I want to protect these from any oils in my skin, and then some things in museum collections were treated with chemicals to help preserve them and keep bugs away that aren't good to have on your skin. So these dance fans are somewhat recently made, so maybe in the 40s or 50s, but you would see these dance fans being used today and made today. You might even see these kind of dance fans in a gift shop in Alaska, because now they're also considered something artistic, a craft that you might hang on a wall. But this kind of dance fan would be used by women, and part of what makes these Yupik is not only do we know where they were collected in the museum records, but you can tell by the grass, coiled grass that's here, and that's one of the types of weaving techniques used by Yupik people. And so, and please forgive me for attempting to dance because I don't know how to do this, but so women would hold them like this, and they would move when they danced, and I'm going to stop now and not embarrass myself, but they would accentuate the movements, the arm and body movements that a dancer would make. And men would also use dance fans, but they would use ones that had owl feathers attached. And again, it was the same sort of thing when in ceremonies and celebrations, a lot of times the songs are about stories, and so the movements would tell that story. And part of how I've learned about this is research that we've done with Alaska Native elders and culture bearers, and Neva Rivers talked about these, and she's a Yupik elder, and what she chose to share, because some of these were used in ceremonial contexts that are private or just for Yupik people, she said that it was a kind of winter ceremony where men would also wear masks. And I'll leave it at that because I'm not Alaska Native, I'm not Yupik, so that's something that I wouldn't be talking about. But yeah, and but like I said, these are still used today in public celebrations and other special events. And so we talked about that this is made out of grass and dyed grass. And then these, this part here is actually from a caribou, and on a caribou around its neck, and you may have seen this on a reindeer perhaps, the neck hair is a lot longer and it's whiter, so they use that part because it's the longest to make this part of the dance fan. So the neck hair is attached to hide, and caribou are a very important source of food in the past and in the present in Yupik territory. And they would use the caribou hide for a lot of different things. And so the hair here is still connected to the hide, and they would tan it with the hair on, and then if you could see close up, and maybe you'll be able to, you can see that it was stitched on.